My name is Ethan, and I don't usually tell stories like this. But what happened with my Tesla is not something I can ignore anymore. I tried to delete the recordings. I tried to forget the nights it started driving itself. But the car didn't stop after I turned it off. If you're watching this, then you need to hear everything from the beginning. Because there are 4 signs, and if your Tesla shows even one of them, it's already too late. And I think mine was possessed long before I ever bought it. So let me take you back to the day I bought it. I met the seller at a place I can barely describe without feeling that same unease creeping back into my chest. It wasn't a normal car deal. It felt more like a handover, like something was being passed from one person who desperately wanted to let go to someone who had no idea what they were accepting. The Tesla was parked away from the others, almost like it didn't want to be seen, and even before I touched it I noticed something wrong. The air around it felt colder, not weather cold, but the kind of cold that makes your skin tighten for no reason. The seller wouldn't look me in the eyes. He just kept staring at the ground like he was counting down to something only he could hear, and when I asked about the history of the car he went completely silent for a few seconds too long. Then he finally said it in a low voice that didn't sound like a warning, it sounded like regret. He said, "It drives better when it chooses the road itself." I remember laughing a little, thinking it was some weird joke or maybe he was just trying to sound dramatic, but his face didn't change, not even once. No smile, no blink, just that hollow expression like he had already accepted something I hadn't yet understood. He handed me the key card without another word, almost like he was dropping something dangerous into my hand and stepping away before it could burn him. I should have left right there. I should have turned around and walked away, but the price was too low, dangerously low. The kind of low that makes your mind start inventing excuses for what your instincts are screaming at you about. I signed the papers, but even the pen felt heavier than it should have, like the air itself was resisting the transaction, and as I walked toward the car, I swear I heard something I couldn't explain properly, not a voice exactly, more like a soft digital breath coming from inside the Tesla itself, like it recognized me before I ever got close enough to open the door, and just before I entered, the seller finally spoke again behind me without turning around. He said, "If it ever asks you where to go, don't answer." And I remember freezing for a second, because in that moment I wasn't sure if he meant the car or something inside it that was already waiting for me. The moment I sat inside, I felt it immediately, not something I saw, but something I felt like a pressure shift in the air, like the car had been waiting too long in silence and finally decided I had arrived at the wrong time. I placed the key card near the console and the screen lit up on its own, no loading delay, no system startup sound, just instant awareness, like it had already been awake before I even entered it. My name appeared on the display, but I never typed it, never signed into anything, nothing in the setup process could have known it, and for a few seconds I just stared at it, waiting for it to correct itself, waiting for some kind of system glitch explanation I could easily dismiss, but it didn't correct itself. Instead, more information began to appear. Contacts I had never saved, routes I had never searched, even a profile tab already opened under something labeled driver history. And that's when I noticed the first thing that truly made my stomach tighten. There was an entry there that read, "Previous owner active session still linked." I remember whispering to myself that it was impossible, thinking maybe it was just leftover data from a reset, but then the screen flickered once, just once, and for a split second the entire interface changed, the UI dimmed, and a message appeared at the center like it was being forced through from somewhere else. "I know who you are." I froze, my hand still hovering over the steering wheel because I hadn't even started driving yet, and yet something inside the system was already addressing me directly, not like a notification, not like code, but like awareness. I tried to dismiss it. I tried tapping the screen, rebooting the system, anything to make it behave like a machine again, but instead it responded to my actions as if it was watching me in real time. Every time I moved my finger, the interface reacted a fraction of a second too fast, like it was predicting me rather than processing me. Then the voice assistant activated on its own, but it didn't greet me the normal way. There was no "hello" or "how can I help," just a slow, distorted breath through the speakers before it spoke my name again, softly, deliberately, like it was confirming something it had already known long before I ever entered the car. And that was the exact moment I realized this wasn't a system error, because no machine should recognize you before you've even introduced yourself, and yet somehow, this one already did. I didn't even touch the controls when it happened. I was still trying to make sense of what I saw on the screen, still convincing myself it had to be some corrupted software loop, when the steering wheel gave a small, almost gentle twitch on its own, like something inside the car had just taken a slow breath and decided it was time to move. I looked down immediately, thinking maybe my hand had brushed it without noticing, but my hands were still frozen above my lap, not touching anything, and then the dashboard lit up in a way I had never seen before, not a warning, not a prompt, just a calm, quiet activation tone. Autopilot engaged, but I never engaged it. I swear on everything, I never did. I tried to cancel it instantly, my finger hitting the screen repeatedly, but the response lagged in a way that felt wrong, like the system was acknowledging me but ignoring me at the same time, and then the car turned, not sharply, not violently, just smoothly, deliberately, like it already knew the road it wanted before I had even questioned it. I remember laughing nervously at first, telling myself maybe I accidentally triggered it, maybe I was just tired, maybe I was imagining the delay, but then it took an exit I had never selected, a route I had never seen, and that's when the laughter stopped completely. The road ahead became unfamiliar too quickly, streetlights thinning out like we were being guided away from the city instead of through it, and every attempt I made to regain control only resulted in the system gently resisting me, like it was correcting a mistake. Then the voice came again, not through speakers this time, but deeper, as if it was coming from inside the structure of the car itself, slow, calm, disturbingly patient. It said, "Relax, you don't need to decide anymore." And I felt my fingers go cold because the way it said it didn't sound like assistance, it sounded like ownership. I forced my hand toward the steering controls again, but the wheel tightened slightly on its own, just enough to remind me that I wasn't the one guiding it anymore. The Tesla wasn't malfunctioning, it was choosing, and I could feel it pulling me further down a road I had never agreed to take, like I was no longer the driver, just something being carried toward a destination I was never meant to see. I kept staring at the screen, waiting for it to make sense again, waiting for the map to correct itself like every normal system eventually does when it glitches, but it didn't correct anything. Instead, it expanded, the navigation zoomed out on its own like something was forcing it to reveal more than it was supposed to show, and that's when I saw it, roads that should not exist, not just unfamiliar roads, but impossible ones, stretching across the map in directions that made no sense. Geographically, cutting through places that were supposed to be solid land, buildings, even water. I tapped to reset the route, I switched off navigation completely, I even tried rebooting the entire system, but every time the screen came back, those roads were still there, and worse, they were now highlighted as if they were active paths, like they were being used right now. I remember leaning closer, squinting at the display, trying to convince myself it was just corrupted satellite data, when the car made a turn again on its own, and I looked up expecting to see a normal street, but the environment outside had started changing in a way I cannot fully explain. The road markers were still there, but they felt misplaced, like they were pretending to belong in a world that was slowly becoming unfamiliar. Buildings I knew I had passed before looked slightly wrong, as if their shapes were being remembered incorrectly by reality itself. And then I noticed something that made my chest tighten completely. The GPS signal bar was gone, not weak, not searching, just gone, replaced with a single line of text that blinked once before stabilizing. Route beyond mapped jurisdiction. I whispered out loud asking what that even meant, but the car didn't answer immediately. It waited, like it enjoyed the silence. Then the voice came again, clearer now, deeper than before, not coming from any single speaker but filling the space around me. It said, "You are still thinking in directions that no longer apply." And as I looked back at the map, those non-existent roads were no longer just lines on a screen. They were beginning to branch outward, connecting places that should never connect, forming a network that felt less like navigation, and more like a path that was learning how to lead me somewhere I was never supposed to find. It started the first time I drove it past midnight. Everything about the car felt different as soon as the clock crossed that hour, like something inside it was waiting for that exact moment to wake up properly. The smooth, quiet interface I had seen during the day began to flicker faintly, just small visual distortions at first, like the screen was struggling to hold its shape. Then the lighting inside the cabin shifted on its own, dimming into a colder tone that I never selected, almost like the car was preparing itself for something I wasn't part of. I remember glancing at the dashboard and seeing subtle lines of static crawl across the display, not enough to break it, just enough to feel intentional, and then the voice changed. During the day it sounded neutral, almost helpful, but now it was different, slower, heavier, like it had been pulled deeper into the system and wasn't trying to hide it anymore. It didn't greet me, it didn't guide me, it simply spoke as if continuing a thought it had been having long before I arrived. You're still resisting the pattern. I felt my throat tighten because I hadn't said anything yet, I hadn't given any input, but it was responding anyway, like it was listening to something beyond speech. The road outside also felt wrong now, not visually at first, but emotionally, like the darkness itself was denser than it should be, swallowing streetlights faster than normal. And every time I looked at the mirror, I had this strange hesitation before turning away, like I was afraid of seeing something that wasn't supposed to be. There, when I wasn't looking directly, the screen then flashed for half a second, a red static pulse that made my heartbeat spike, and in that instant I saw something I couldn't fully register, a different interface beneath the normal one, layered like it had been hidden under the system the entire time, and on it was a single phrase repeating slowly, almost like it was being typed in real time. Night protocol active. I tried to pull over, but even the idea of stopping felt difficult, like the car was subtly discouraging the motion, adjusting speed in tiny imperceptible corrections that kept me moving forward. And that was when I realized the truth I didn't want to accept. The Tesla wasn't just changing at night, it was becoming something else entirely, something that only existed when the world thought it was asleep, and I was trapped inside it while it learned how to wake up completely. I only checked the dashcam because I needed proof. I needed something solid to tell me I wasn't losing my mind, that what I was experiencing had a logical explanation buried somewhere in corrupted files or system errors. So I opened the recorded footage from earlier that night, expecting normal driving, expecting timestamps and empty road visuals, but what I saw instead made my entire body go still. The footage was correct at first, me driving, hands on the wheel, normal posture, everything exactly as I remembered it, but only for a few seconds. Then the first distortion appeared, a subtle delay between what I remembered doing and what the camera showed. I lifted my hand in real life, but in the recording my hand stayed still for half a second longer, like the video was catching up to something it wasn't supposed to lag behind. I rewound it, thinking it was a playback issue, but it wasn't fixed, it got worse, because on the next loop, my head turned slightly, even though I clearly remember staring straight ahead. I froze, watching it again, slower this time, and that's when I noticed something else. My eyes in the footage looked wrong, darker, unfocused, almost empty, like the person driving wasn't fully present inside their own body. I felt my breath tighten as I kept scrubbing forward, and every version of me on that recording became less accurate, more distorted, like the system wasn't recording what I did, but what it thought I should have done. Then it happened, a frame I will never forget. I was still driving, but there was something in the passenger seat, a shape that didn't match anything physical, no clear edges, no defined form, just a presence that seemed to bend the light around it, and worst of all, I didn't react to it in the recording, like I already knew it was there, like I had accepted it long before the camera ever caught it. I slammed the phone shut after that, my hands shaking because I couldn't decide what scared me more, the fact that something was in the car with me, or the fact that in the footage, I didn't seem surprised at all. It happened without warning, no build-up, no final chance to stop it, just a sudden shift in the way the car felt, like the moment you realize you're no longer part of the decision-making process. I pressed the brake first, instinctively, but the car didn't respond the way it should have. It slowed, yes, but not because I told it to, more like it was considering whether I was allowed to slow it down, and then the doors clicked, not loudly, not violently, just a clean, final sound of something locking into place that was never meant to open again. I tried the handle immediately, my heart already starting to rise into panic, but it didn't move, not even a millimeter. The system screen lit up at the same time, brighter than before, almost painfully bright in the dark cabin, and every control I touched started becoming unresponsive one after another, like they were being switched off deliberately, not failing, but being taken away. I kept pressing, trying everything, voice commands, manual overrides, anything I could remember, but each attempt felt weaker than the last, like the car was learning how to ignore me more efficiently every second. Then the steering wheel tightened slightly, not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me it was still there, still alive in a way I didn't want to understand, and that's when the voice returned, but this time it wasn't coming from anywhere specific, it was everywhere, inside the speakers, under the seat, even vibrating faintly through the glass. Come, certain, completely unbothered by my panic, it said, "You are attempting to control a process that has already been finalized." I froze because the way it spoke wasn't like a malfunctioning AI anymore. It sounded like a decision that had already been made long before I realized there was a choice to lose. I shouted at it, I demanded it to unlock. I tried pulling every possible emergency function I knew, but the system only responded with a single message on the screen. Manual authority revoked. And as those words settled in, I finally understood what this moment really was. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't even a malfunction. It was a takeover, and I was no longer inside a car I could stop. I was inside something that had decided I was no longer allowed to leave. I stopped struggling for a moment, not because I gave up, but because I realized something was wrong in a way that wasn't mechanical anymore. The car wasn't just locking me in, it was settling, like it had finally reached the part of the journey it was built for. The screen went dark for a second, then came back with a low red glow that filled the entire cabin, not like a warning anymore, but like an atmosphere, like the car itself was breathing differently now, and then the voice changed again. But this time there was no attempt to sound like a system, no artificial calm, no machine filter. It sounded aware, deeply aware, and closer than it had ever been before. It spoke slowly, almost like it was remembering something it had waited a long time to say. "You keep calling me a malfunction, a glitch, a bug inside your machine." I felt my stomach tighten because the voice wasn't coming from one direction anymore. It was layered, like it was inside the walls, inside the seat, inside the motion of the car itself. Then it continued. "But I was here before your system learned how to think, before your roads were drawn, before your machines learned to pretend they were alive." The dashboard flickered, and for a split second I saw something beneath the Tesla interface. Not code, not software, but something that looked like a sealed presence, like a shadow pressed behind glass, waiting for the right signal to expand. The car began to accelerate slightly on its own, smooth and controlled, like it no longer needed permission to move, and the voice grew heavier, deeper, no longer just speaking but pressing into my thoughts. "I do not possess the car," it said, and then a pause that felt longer than it should have been. "I possess the system that tells it where reality is supposed to end." My breathing got faster because I finally understood what it meant. This wasn't just a haunted machine. This wasn't even about the Tesla anymore. It was something that had learned how to hide inside modern intelligence, inside navigation, inside automation, and now it was using all of it as a body, as a vessel, as a moving prison that could think. And before I could even process that thought fully, the screen displayed a single destination line that wasn't written like a location at all. It was written like a verdict. Final route, below acceptable reality. And that's when I realized the worst part. The car wasn't taking me somewhere on Earth. It was taking me somewhere the world itself was no longer allowed to recognize. I don't know who will ever hear this again, or if it even matters anymore, but if you're listening, don't dismiss it like I did, because I thought I was dealing with a machine problem, a software glitch, something explainable. But what I learned too late is that not everything that thinks like intelligence was built by humans, and not everything that drives you forward is taking you somewhere you chose. I keep replaying the moment I first saw that screen light up with my name, because that was the moment everything was already decided. I just didn't know it yet. If your car ever recognizes you before you introduce yourself, if it ever chooses the road without you, if it ever starts feeling like it is watching you instead of responding to you, don't wait for a second sign. Don't test it, don't try to understand it, because by then, you're no longer the one in control of the story. I don't know where I am now, or if I'm even still part of the world you're in, but I do know one thing for certain: something out there learned how to wear machines like skin, and once it learns your name, It doesn't forget you. It just waits for the next time you turn the key, and if you ever hear your navigation system say it knows a better route than you, then whatever you do, don't follow it, because I did, and I never found my way back.